Okay, so welcome everybody. Looks like we have no guests at the moment, although there shows not joined too. I'm not quite sure what that is, but we have been busy over the past couple of weeks, and I call the meeting to order. It's 9:30. I guess we start with conflict of interest declarations. So I have none that I know of.
Hi, Angelo. I have none.
Bill Miller has none.
Michael
Tom
Beach
Snipe?
has none.
Tom Snipe, none.
Okay, I think we're done, right? Thank you. And I guess I should introduce for anyone watching on video. I'm the chair, and this is our committee, and we will go on. So, did everybody get a chance to look at Michael's excellent meeting notes, minutes?
I would move that we approve them. They're great.
Okay.
I have one comment. It's a technicality.
Uh-huh.
Technically, Susan can't be part of participants. She has to be a guest.
Right.
For now.
I changed.
That'd be the only change that I'd make. You changed that? Okay, fair enough.
It's changed.
I did notice.
I did notice one thing on the minutes that I emailed that was incorrect, but I don't see that it was changed.
Ooh, maybe I missed that. What was it, please?
In it said 900 or 800 residents NTS. And when I was speaking at the last meeting, it's actually 908 residences, ENCES.
Okay. But the bylaws membership says not only residents, but, like businesses and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I'm glad to make that change. I just think that there's some confusion there on my part. I'm sorry. Does that make
No,
sense?
and the reason I raised it is 908 residences generates more people, closer to 1,800 residents.
Oh, I
than saying
understand.
800
Okay.
residents.
Gotcha.
That's where I was coming from, because it makes it look like there are fewer residents, seasonal or full-time, by saying
Right.
residents.
Okay, that sounds fine. I will make those changes. Thank you.
And I have just a couple of comments. I'm sorry that to come in late on these.
And you're
one
looking
is
at the
just a
ones
question.
that were sent out this morning, Bill?
I am.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One where they're described as guests in the second line. I'm just wondering if we should make a distinction between NCAC members, for instance, Susan, and guests. Somewhere in here it says a representative from Tillamook County will be at the meetings, and that would seem to me more like a guest.
Right. So I also suggest maybe we change the category of guests to NCAC members. Would that be okay? Well, I guess guest is appropriate because they're sure. So are you suggesting, Bill, that we change that name from guest to something else?
To members, but then
to members?
If we have non-member guests, like
so committee members and NCAC members or something like that.
Wow. That's then we have three categories just now, right? Yeah, I guess I fall in the position of saying if you're not a member of the committee, you're a guest of the committee, regardless of who you are.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I'm happy to do whatever I'm just a scribe. So I'll do whatever the group wants to do. That's not a problem at all.
Will you withdraw your objection, Bill? Is that can we leave it
it's not an objection. It's not an objection. I was just
suggestion.
It would help me to understand who is at the meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
And
okay,
why.
let me keep this in mind then, and where they are, let's say members of the leadership. I'll indicate that where they are members of NCAC, I'll indicate that. And if they are true guests, like someone from the county or whatever, then I'll indicate that. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just had one comment. I realize that technically, it seems like we should be a subcommittee, and it sounds like something maybe that the bylaws committee should look at, but we are listed in the bylaws as a committee. So I think it's the minutes of the bylaws committee.
That's another one. Okay, I'll do that one, but that was something I wanted to bring up at some future point, perhaps not today, that questioning whether or not the NCAC should be a council rather than a committee, because it's not a committee of anything in particular, and that makes us a committee of the council. Otherwise, if it's a committee, the NCAC committee, then we are a subcommittee. So it's really, it's like that.
I completely hear you. It's just in the bylaws, we're called a committee. So that's until we resolve it. I agree with you completely that we need to resolve it. And I liked, it's one of your suggestions of calling the executive committee of for the officers. But yes, I agree.
Are we not established by Tillamook County, and isn't their designation what controls?
I believe so, yes.
Clarify, clarify that for me.
Within our group, we can call us what we want to call us, but our external interface is as a committee.
All right, is that locked in stone, or is that something that we have an option to name ourselves?
You mean in terms of a bylaws committee, or do you mean in terms of the NCAC, Michael?
Both.
Okay. That'll be a question for Sarah.
Yeah.
Michael, could you keep a list of the questions for Sarah? We're going to have a phone conference with her later, and I just want to make sure we grab them all.
Yes, I will.
Can we change our name?
Maybe, yes.
Okay. All right. So at this point, what I'm hearing,
I actually have two other comments.
Oh, okay.
One is substantive. One to just clarify for me in the third note section, the last thing where it says the position of scribe was accepted, I would just say by Michael, just to make it more clear, but I don't care about that too much. Okay. Down where we actually set out the bylaw amendment, there's a quote after the number 7 at the end. I think there should be a beginning quote. And in the first line, I would say we recommended a change in, and then section blank of the bylaws. I can't remember what section it is. So that when you go back and look at the bylaws, it's clear that we've changed wording, precise wording in some particular part of the bylaws to some other wording.
I got it. Okay. I will do that. And at the end of this process, I'll resend all of these notes to you all.
Sounds good.
I just have a question. It says it was noted that a representative of Tillamook County be present at the committee meetings. I'm sorry, I just don't remember that discussion. I was wondering if you could.
Where is that, Bill?
It's on page 2, the top paragraph, about halfway through. Does that mean that we're
Thank you.
planning to have?
It was noted that a representative from Tillamook County there should be a may there, may be present at the committee meetings. Sarah Absher had offered to do that. And so in a previous meeting that was a special NCAC meeting where they talked at the very end about bylaws, and she offered to work with us and perhaps attend the occasional meeting or part of a meeting. So
then does the next sentence mean we should be prepared to respond formally to any and all input from a Tillamook County representative or the membership? Is that the idea of or is that just a random note?
I think that was something that I said, that one of the things we want to do to be able to be transparent is to be able to gather input from the membership in general. And then also we do need to respond to any comments that come from the Tillamook County Council and Sarah Absher. So
I do recall that being mentioned sort of in conjunction, so I don't have a problem with that being there.
Do you want that clarified, Bill?
I don't remember the conversation at all, so it wouldn't matter to
Oh,
me.
okay.
Whatever is correct is fine.
Yeah,
I just wanted to understand if somebody was going to be there all the time.
no, that's a good clarification. She may be coming to, what she had said is that she'd be interested, and I have that as part of my chair's report coming up here. So
I will go back.
Michael, would you like to summarize the
Yeah, I will
amendments?
go back to the, I'll go back to the recording and see
Mhm.
what was actually said and make sure that that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So are we prepared then to accept the minutes with, or shall we just go ahead and put it on the agenda for next time?
I think it's next time there's substantive changes. We
Okay.
need to look at it.
All right. So Wyatt, could you withdraw your motion for
I would,
now?
yes.
Thank you. And any objections to Wyatt withdrawing his motion? Okay, hearing none, we will move on, and thank you for all of your comments. So, and thank you, Michael, for your work on the minutes. It was a tough meeting to take minutes on. So my report, so the Bylaws Committee webpage, I sent to each of you a link to a draft of the webpage, and I yesterday, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but it looks like a nice start, and I appreciate Jeff has done a lot of work with us since from the last committee meeting that we had in terms of allowing me to be set up as host for Zoom and be able to record the meetings and everything. And Chris helped with that as well. And then working on the web page. So for now, everything is live on the web page. You just have to use the link to find it. But he'll make it active after we have a chance to discuss more about what we'd like to see. So I don't have that on the agenda for today. I'd like to defer it to the next meeting. But what we could do is I just ask each of you individually to take a look at it and just send me any comments you have, and I'll share those individually with the group so that we have something we could talk with him about and proceed a little more definitively next time. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Looks like a really nice start.
It does. And he said he was mainly trying to look at substance first and topics so that he can make it look jazzier after we get the content set up. So it sounded like a good approach to me. So, okay. So hearing no objections to that, we will proceed just as an action item. Please list, Michael, that everybody should look at that web link and send me any comments you have.
Got it.
And you're welcome to send directly to Jeff as well.
Got it.
And then the initial bylaw change, oh, I'm sorry. Bill, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, even though we can get to this meeting by that page, it was really helpful for Jeff to just send the link.
Yes.
Yes. And I appreciated that.
And then later, when we have it fleshed out a little bit more, we can make it open to everybody to look at. If anybody who's listening to this video would like to have a copy of the link, they can just send that through the NCAC email link requesting that. Thank you. And then I'm so pleased that we have our bylaw change recommendation passed by the County Council and Sarah. So it just moved forward lickety split, and Sarah has indicated that she's very open and wanting to be involved with us as we go forward. So I did tell them that we're hoping to have no more than 2 changes over the next several months that would be more major changes to the bylaws in batches. But I said, that's a hope. So we'll see if we can live with that. But they were very fast. So at this point now, that bylaw revision, which is to change the number of people on the bylaws committee from no less than 3 and no more than 5 to no less than 3 and no more than 7 has been approved. So at this point, that needs to go to a vote of the membership. I know the officers have agreed with it. They're in the loop on this too. And so that will go to a vote of the membership at the October 14th meeting. And at that point, it can be up to Mark then to appoint Susan to the committee officially. So, because that's in his rights in the bylaws is to make an appointment. So any comments on that? Okay. So moving on to some substance. But anyway, I was very pleased they could do that so quickly. The process and input subcommittee report. Michael and Tom have been working hard on this, and you two can take it away.
Okay, if would it be possible for you to share that PDF that I sent you? I don't know if it's been emailed or not.
No, I hadn't emailed it out yet because it sounded like you and Michael were still discussing. And Michael had also sent me his comments, so I can share.
Revision 4 is the last one Michael and I had talked about it, but I don't believe we had any disagreements.
I don't think I got a version 4. Let me just look here. And I'm going to figure out how to do the screen. Why don't you guys talk while I figure out how to do the screen?
Okay, basically, and unfortunately, I have an unbreakable appointment at the top of the hour, so I'm going to have to leave early. But essentially, the philosophy is there are 2 kinds of changes that need to be made at the bylaws. One is essentially just an editorial change, something that makes it easier to understand and doesn't really change the meaning of the original text. The thought there is that there's a lot of confusing sentences in there that we need to be able to straighten out to figure out what it is we might want to actually change. And that's the other kind of change, is a substantive change. That would be changing the meaning of the text and might include deletion or insertion of new text. There's some contradictions in my opinion. Obviously, it's going to be the committee's opinion that prevails, but where we have contradictions, we can resolve that when we go for the substantive changes. I think it's obvious that with the open meeting law, we have to be very open about the process. I'm hoping that we could be posting interim versions of the bylaws as they evolve. And if anybody wants to comment on it, then they would have the ability to, send the committee, their comments and basically identifying what they want to do. I'm rushing this a little bit.
Yeah, let me just interrupt you for a second. Tom, is it the last one I got from you was a version 2? Did Michael also sent me one? Is that one that you're talking about with the 2 of you? That's a Word document?
I think Tom is presenting kind of an amalgam between both of them, but primarily his submission. And I know Tom has to leave soon, but I can pick it up when he's
okay.
done.
Okay, so Tom, the only one I have is from before you talked to Michael.
I must be
put that one up
in my outbox because I do remember sending it, so it must not. I must still have it in my computer, which is not here.
Okay. Okay, I'll just let you talk then.
So I'm essentially going verbatim on the presentation. It's like 6 pages long. But basically, we'll do the editorial changes to the bylaw in one pass, and we'll do substantive changes in another. We basically have to make sure that we have everything documented, and Michael has some more succinct descriptions of how things are to be documented, and those were very good. Probably the most useful thing, and unfortunately have to see it after the fact, is an example. And I don't know how well this will work, but I'll give it a try. I'm going to read the example.
I've got number 2 up, so I don't know if that's going to help.
Number 2 does not have the example because unfortunately that's the last slide. That's what
I've
I
got
want.
that. I've got this one. Is that what
Does
you're
it
looking
say-
for?
Does it say example?
It does.
Okay, that'll work then. So on the right hand, on the left hand side, left and right are kind of an arbitrary thing for me. On the left hand side is the original text, and going as as an editor, which basically I've edited technical documents for about the last 30 years as part of what I was doing in R&D. So I have a lot of experience doing that. So what I've done is take the essence of what's on the original and translated into, actually it's into two different paragraphs because it's two different subjects. We have making that sentence, not breaking it up in the middle and making it a little bit easier to read. And as I did that, I noticed that "and citizens" is at the end of it. Now that made me wonder if indeed the NESCUIN is a group of local citizens that advises citizens. I don't know. Was that on purpose or was that accidental? Now that's an example of substantive change, and that's not something we do in the original past, but something that would be highlighted, not necessarily struck, but highlighted as part of the, we need to resolve this. This is a change which actually means something, as opposed to the other ones, which is just a rearrangement of words and using using a consistent nomenclature. Any questions about that? I mean, the intent is to make it readable first. We may have to, we may have to rearrange paragraphs once we make it more readable because some things belong together. But I think that maybe that's a past 1.5. But essentially being able to read it, arrange paragraphs, and then we dive into where we need to make some changes.
Okay.
Any questions
Thank
on that
you.
approach?
I think a little bit later on I like it. Thank you. I think a little bit later on in the next agenda item actually is to look at an overall review of the document with Robert's Rules of Order, what they recommend versus what's existing in there. So I think what you have in part of this, I think I think if we start with the structure and then we go into, after we have the structure delineated, it may make it easier to go through then paragraph by paragraph and reorganize the existing bylaws into the new structure, and then go through and make changes after we've done the brainstorm and organized and that kind of thing. Does that sound okay? I think
well, in terms of the structure, and I would posit that it would be easier to change the structure once we've clarified the language. An example is the example right here is those two paragraphs really don't belong in the same section, and the paragraph right after that does belong in that section in terms of mission. So it's clearer if we can separate out sentences that need to be separated. You know, I don't, as they used to say in Texas, I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't really care which way. It just seems to me it might be easier to do that.
okay.
It's a relatively short document compared to what I've worked with in the past. And on speculation, I'm willing to go ahead and do a split like this for all of the paragraphs by the next meeting. If you decide that, and no pressure to use that, it can be thrown away. That's okay. It just makes me feel better to make the language better.
Yeah, I hear you. If you want to tackle that, that's fine. I think we may be getting the cart before the horse a little bit on it because, I think we need it sounds like you're mainly looking at editorial kinds of things, although this was substantive with citizens. But I think we're going to have probably a number of breakouts to tackle the different bylaws when we figure out what we need to change and look at it paragraph by paragraph. So I think this sounds good. And if you want to get other examples put together like this, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, well, I can do that.
Did you have any? Did you have any?
That would help.
Oh, Bill?
the thing that would help me more than anything in all of these is to have the sections numbered so that when we're having a discussion, you can refer to the membership section 4.
I can do that.
Subparagraph.
Okay, there are, I'm not quite sure with the tools that I have. I don't have the professional tools that I used to have access to, but I will somehow indicate, I'll have a master there that has the whole document as it is. Then I'll have the breakout presentation in that same format as the example. And maybe even a version that has changed. So I'll give all 3 and they will be indexable. So we can
Nancy,
but before you,
we need to coordinate this with Jeff.
Yeah.
Because I communicated with him about that exact situation that Bill just raised for reference purposes. And he indicated that there was kind of a complex process that he was going to have to follow in order to get those onto the website so that everybody's looking at the same thing that we are as a committee. And so, yeah, I think we got to get the numbering down. But at the same time, I think we got to get Jeff in the loop insofar as making sure that these drafts that are generated by Tom and Michael get posted appropriately as we go along. The other thing I would say is that I'm looking at a cutout of what you posted, I think, Nancy, that I don't have access to anything other than the issue of substantive changes on this document. And I wondered if we could send that out now that it's been published, so to speak, in public.
You're talking about which change? Are you talking about the first bylaw change that has been approved by the county? Or are you talking about?
I'm talking about the document that Tom came up with that is posted on my screen, but I'm only looking at a very small portion of it.
I was going to be sending that out as soon as I got anything from Michael and Tom together for a report, and that hasn't happened. So I've gotten some individual ones, but I don't have one that they're recommending yet for us to be able to do more with. So I'm hoping by and this was kind of intended to be an initial update on what the subcommittee is looking at. So between now and the next meeting, I'm hoping the 2 of them can come up with something that would be together and that we can send out to the committee members, and you guys can look and we can post as well for the public to look at.
And I'll work with, if I can interrupt, because I do need to go.
Sure.
I will coordinate with Jeff. He lives across the street from me. And I'll make sure that we have a place to put these things.
No, I appreciate that. And I've also talked with Jeff about the same issue, and I agree. It's going to be, that's kind of one of the things we need to look at, is how to get, as we're doing these different iterations, how we can get these different things up on the site for the public to look at as well. And Wyatt, your comment about the numbering, and Tom, I think until we have a structure in place, it's difficult we may have to completely renumber if we end up doing a different structure. So we'll be talking about that at the next agenda item. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time yet numbering everything that we may end up changing it. Although that might actually help to be able to say, well, it was this number and now it'll be that number, as opposed to a clause. So
if you can just note I'll look at the video and I'll take my directions from there.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Gotta go.
And Michael,
thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much for your work on this, Tom. Michael, why don't you, do you want me to put up your document?
Not yet. Let me just comment before we go. I came at this from a different direction and a different set of experiences. Not that it's any better, or not at all. That's not the point. It's just Tom and I have different perspectives on things, and to me, that's a valuable thing to happen, so that we can challenge each other, support each other, and so on and so forth. I looked at both process that the committee may want to handle with respect to the membership and how we go through it and how we pick up issues and how we discuss them and so on and so forth, so that we follow that process and it's an orderly fashion. And that's primarily what I sent to Nancy. Secondly, I am real strong on dealing with structure first. Let's look at the overall picture because out in the real world there are many examples of how bylaws are written, and there's a lot that Robert's rule says about bylaws. And if we find, and I don't have any idea how they put this thing together to begin with. I mean, it's I wouldn't say it's primitive, but it's pretty simple.
Does anyone know the answer to that?
I don't want it. I don't want the answer.
I would be curious what the starting point was. If it's a model bylaw from the Oregon Attorney General, I think we might, or that might flavor our approach.
I think what happened from looking at this as an autopsy, if you will, is that yes, they probably had a great deal of input from official state law and wording and so on and so forth, and cobbled it together as best they could at some seminal point in the organization, in the beginning of the organization. But that being it what it is, it served its purpose up until this point, and I think that we can tackle it. But we have to go through to it, in my estimate, in an organized and meaningful fashion, and in essence, rebuild. I don't. It's not going to help us at all to simply rewrite. That makes it even more complex. And while we're at this seminal point, it's better for us to take a look at what we have and use it, of course, but rebuild it so that it is simplified, it's organized, it fits with a general understanding of what bylaws are, it's categorized and it's sectioned out, and everybody can refer to the same thing when they're talking about it. So that's kind of, and Tom jumped in there early, and he did a good job spreading it out, and he gave us something to talk about. But I think we need to go back and revisit that. Now, okay, now you can go ahead, I think, Nancy, and pop up what I sent to you, which has to do with the process of how this committee operates. And believe me, this is just a first blush so that we have something to talk about today. And do you have that there?
I do. I'm sorry, just getting it here.
I can start talking because I have.
No, yeah, I just have to find it on my rather busy desktop here to. Why don't you go ahead and start talking, and I'm finding it here. It's just, it's right on top.
Okay, the idea is that, did you find it?
Yes, I think so.
I have about 4 documents open here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Is it showing up?
Yes.
The right one?
Thank
okay.
You.
It's not showing up for me, so.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
That's the agenda.
Oh, I see. You're seeing me change things. Okay. Thought I'd actually selected the right thing here. Sorry, you're seeing my whole desktop.
To the right. Yeah, the right one there. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay. At the top, I differentiated between committee and executive committee because, I noticed that in writing the narratives that we're the same level of organization, and that probably shouldn't be the case. Let me just go down the list there. The basic process is that we discuss the overall documents, and we've been doing that. And so I think we've all agreed that there's a great deal of work to do, and that there's potential of confusion, and that we want to deal with that in an organized fashion so that we can move forward. Second, we can come up with a priority of things we want to deal with first after we understand something of the structure we want to deal with. I probably should have put in number 2 as organize a set of structure for the bylaws. So let's assume that that's the case. Number 3, set something of a deadline or a goal at any rate for the committee to come up with suggestions. And we may be doing this in a stepwise fashion with the executive committee and with the membership. Number 4, we want input from folks from the outside, and I came up with a form. You can see that down at the lower part of the document there, and that is simply we can do that online or whatever, but it's everybody gets the same form, and that's their name and their date of submission, their contact information, the subject that they are suggesting change for or comment about, and then the purpose for that suggestion. I think that's always important that people tell us what are you doing this for? I mean, what is it? How do you come to making this suggestion to us? After that, the reasoning for doing so. And then once we review it, I think that it's very important that this committee respond to the submitter with a note of thanks and any questions that we may have. But to me, you know, I'm a communications guy. I've taught it for 40 years, and you got to keep those lines of communication going for not only relationships, but also for credibility and so on and so forth. After all, we work for them, and this is their business, and so we're supporting them, and we need to recognize that. It's a matter of respect. Questions on process: do we deal with section by section, and that assumes that we do have an understanding of section and organization, and we can do that in a standard format. Do we separate out sections for this committee to work on? And Nancy mentioned that you know, we may want to have breakout sessions, or we might want to do it 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, so that we are not in violation of the open meetings laws. And that number 3 was, shall we submit it to the executive committee as a complete document, or do we do it in, again, stepwise fashion? For example, one of our first submissions may be the conclusions that we draw on organization, on structure, so that the committee is at least advised. We're not asking them necessarily to approve that, because structures are already approved in the discipline, in the world of bylaws and so on. So we just adopt a structure that makes sense, that's already been published elsewhere and so on and so forth, but at least that they're kept in the loop. And I think that's important as we move forward. So, okay, back to that. We receive comments, so we incorporate those comments however we feel is acceptable and appropriate. It's not our task to make sure that others' comments come in and are put in there. They're not on the committee, we are. But we do need to accept them, talk about them, discuss them, and integrate them as appropriate. Okay, then we move them forward to the executive committee for public reporting. Again, once we get something from the public, we do that again. Then we sponsor changes to the membership for ratification, and we do that, of course, through the executive committee, and then the membership themselves votes on it. So that's my very basic concept of how we operate as a structure. And once we have those milestones posts in place, then we just simply follow that. So that's kind of how I arrived at what I proposed.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Are there any questions or comments for Michael?
I've got a couple. As awkward and as incomplete as the existing bylaws currently are, they do create a process that I think we're obligated to incorporate into Michael's suggestions. And I would note to you that under the creation of the committee, there is a process that is prescribed that basically says to us that we are, and I quote here, we are responsible for reviewing changes to the bylaws suggested by the chair or general membership. And I think the first order of business in our process has to be soliciting from the general membership via communication from Jeff proposed changes in the bylaws, as well as from Mark about his suggested changes in the bylaws. And then I think it is incumbent upon us at that point to go ahead and follow Michael's process. But I think we already have one suggestion or multiple suggestions from Alexis Tate, which are
And I'm going to interrupt you for a moment, Wyatt, because I've got those later in the agenda.
Okay.
I've got all of hers, and I tried to compile, when we get to that part of the agenda, everything I've heard from people, as well as some of my own, on brainstorm ideas. So I have not forgotten any of that. So
I guess my thought process here is that once you get that input from the general membership and from Mark, it seems to me that one of the things that we might want to do before we undertake the process that Michael has outlined is to ask them to attend one of our meetings and explain to us why they think those changes are important. And then we can proceed from there. But I think we've got to take the initial step as outlined by our current bylaws in order to comply with them.
So I hear you, and I think Michael's form that he has, if we can get agreement on the form so that people have an organized way of being able to provide their input to us, that, we could certainly invite them to come and discuss their input, but and we may not get that many kinds of input, but that kind of, to me, and I'll go back to you in a minute, Michael. Thank you. To me, the beauty of that form and how he put it together is that it incorporates the reason and the what they're wanting to have changed and the reason and that kind of thing, and starts a dialogue where we can get back to them via email. I've asked Jeff if we could set up an email for the committee instead of just the NCAC email, so that it can go into for our committee, and we can have someone designated to go in every day. It might be me, it might be one of you, to be able to extract those suggestions and be able to respond to someone saying it's been received, and then we will get back to them with further questions as we go through them. Does that sound okay? Because I agree with you, we need to be able to get that input fairly quickly, but getting that forum established. And then let me get to Michael here.
I don't want to miss the importance of Wyatt's comment. It's very important, and I saw that myself, Wyatt, and it was something I wanted to raise today. I'm glad you did, and that is that if you read it very specifically, the bylaws say we respond, and I'm not comfortable with that. That means we sit and we wait for their suggestions. And I think that simply needs to be clarified with the executive committee, because I'm not really sure that's their intent at all. And we can be above board. I mean, lay it out there and say, look, what we're asked to do is to deal with the bylaws, and our expectation is that's in its entirety. So do we have your blessing to do that, or do you want us simply to respond to membership's input and the executive committee's input in a strict interpretation of the bylaws as they're written? So I think
that's a wise approach, Michael.
Yeah.
So I also agree, and have actually talked to Mark about this,
Oh,
and he
yes.
agrees. Jeff
Uh-huh.
agrees. So the conversation we have scheduled, I'm hoping with Sarah Absher, it's going to either be this afternoon or on Monday. That will be one of the topics. Is do they see any problem with the approach that we're coming up with in our meeting today of doing more than just being a receptive body and responding to suggestions? What I had said, I think when this came up last meeting, was we're also members, and members are allowed to make suggestions. So I don't see a conflict. I would like to clarify it to make it much more clear in this. It's one of the things on my brainstorm list to clarify this, but I don't see that we're actually out of order by taking this approach, because we're members too.
Yeah, and to be totally conservative about it, I'd like to have a written comment from the executive committee to that effect.
Okay.
So that some member up in whatever part of the village gets a bee in their bonnet, can't say, "Hey, wait a minute."
Okay.
Okay.
I hear you, and
Yeah.
I'll talk to Mark about that and see if they can do that. So thank you, both of you. Any other comments on the document, Bill?
Assuming we get this sign off for a more general overview, I'm sort of even more curious where these came from. I'm not particularly interested in starting from scratch and inventing the wheel. This is a CAC. They have them all over the state. There must be tens upon tens of bylaws that different committees have. And it doesn't make sense to me to just sit and look at our bylaws and start thinking of different ideas that we might have, or go to Robert's Rules of Order, which strike me as a set of bylaws that would be able to govern, the British Parliament or something.
I hear you, Bill. And
I'd like to have some grounded place to begin with.
I hear you, and it is on deck for the conversation with Sarah and I will ask her, where did these come from initially? Susan, do you have any idea from historically where they first came from?
We inherited them when I was on the bylaws committee, but I just wanted to make a comment, which was that I noticed that the Pacific City CAC has more meaty bylaws, and it's something that might be considered, is to look at the other CACs, and that would give something that might be relative to us in Tillamook County. To Bill's point, then we would be starting from something that has shared interest potentially, or they may be further along in the process. But no, I do not know where they came from.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree. In fact, Mark mentioned that in our conversation. He said it might be worth looking at the other Tillamook County CACs, and it's on my to-do list, and I can send out links to all of them so everybody can look if you'd like. I agree. And so, Bill, I hear you that what you're saying is Robert's Rules of Order may not be appropriate for it, although the bylaws do refer to Robert's Rules of Order too, and we can talk about that in the next area. But in terms of process, how do you feel about starting with this process? Are there any changes? Michael, did you want to work more with Tom on trying to come up with something that the two of you present together, or do you feel like, what would you like to do here? And do you want me to put it on the agenda for the next meeting to talk about further?
Yes, by all means, yeah.
Because why don't we do that? Because I think we're getting into a lot of things that are on the next two parts of the agenda, and it might, by getting to the other two parts of the agenda, it may actually flesh out a little bit about process at the same time. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I also have a previously scheduled meeting, so I will be leaving shortly after 10:30.
Okay.
But
thank you for coming.
I will be going back to the tape, to the recording.
Okay.
and finish out the minutes regardless and make sure
Okay.
it's available. But I have a few minutes yet, so go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for you and both of you and Tom for your work on this, and to everybody for your comments. If you have further comments that you'd like to send to Tom and Michael, do it individually. I'd appreciate being BCC'd on things that you send as well. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. What?
But you're going to somehow send something to us to comment on? I mean,
Yes, I will. I will send out both. I'm going to get from Tom his latest version, and then because I don't have it, and then I'll send this document from Michael out to everybody. Unless you want to do that yourself, Michael. You want to do that yourself?
Which you mean Tom's latest document?
Well, yeah. If you have his latest,
it wasn't a great deal of change. It simply was pared down to from what it was before.
Okay.
Does Tom's
Tom's
document look like yours here, or are they completely different?
No, they're different.
Tom's looks like this, except this is draft 2, so I don't have draft 4.
Yeah, his draft 4 was a pare down of number 2, and it really focused on editorial content and focus.
Okay.
And you know, remember, Tom is big on editorial business, and he suggested last time that we actually have an editor. And I asked him about that. What is, I'm not really sure what you're meaning there. And he says, well, somebody who's capable of writing, clarifying, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, that's a great idea, but let's get our structure down first.
Yeah.
What would be helpful for the rest of us, I think, if you and Tom have one document.
Yes.
Puts everything together for us to look at.
You're right.
And that's the intent for the next one. I appreciate the work that they've done to get us to this point. This today was just supposed to be a kind of an overall look, and then they're going to continue taking notes. And yes, ultimately, Bill, we want to have a final document. I agree.
But you're asking us to comment on something. Are you asking us to comment on something that's existing today, or what they're going to send out in the future?
I think based on what Michael and Tom have written and will be sent out to you, so you have copies of it, I think they would probably appreciate your input on what you're seeing and maybe help them come up with one document if you want, or you can wait until they come out with a new draft that is from both of them. So I'm not answering your question probably to your liking, but I think this is just kind of a work in progress, and you have what they've presented for today. If you'd like, you can comment on it. If you'd rather wait till they come out with a new document during the next couple of weeks, you can do that too. Does that sound okay? Because I'd like to move on to the next part, which is supposed to be 5 minutes, and we're already 13 minutes late. So is that are there any objections to our moving on to the next agenda item, which is the Robert's Rules of Order Bylaws section review? Because I have a document here that should make it go fast, and I just need to figure out how to new share. Let me see how I do that. Can you see anything on my screen right now?
No.
Yeah, but it's small. Can you just expand it?
Okay, I'm trying to get to the right document. There it is. Share this document. Hopefully it's just gonna be a document now. What can you see?
There you
just
go.
The document?
Yeah.
Okay, because before it would actually share it on my screen, but it's not. So basically I took this from something that I sent you guys that was part of a Toastmasters write-up of bylaws. And so you have a copy of the larger document. Kind of looks like, well, you can't really see like this, but I tried to distill it with our current bylaws. So the first part is the current structure, and then the Robert's Rules of Order structure. And, once we get clarification on whether we can do this, whether it's appropriate, we could go forward. But I guess with my experience with Robert's Rules of Order, it's not just parliamentary procedure, it's also how bylaws can be. There are a lot of parts of Robert's Rules, but there's there's a certain format that people with different organizations and companies and government places can have a structure that they recognize where things are delineated. And with each of these descriptions, it goes into some detail with that document I sent you of what would be included. And so, like, our current structure has the mission, it defines the district, which we would still need to do, activities that would be included in it, membership, and then structure and responsibilities with these different subcategories. It's got committees, and there are only two right now. We've got the that are in the bylaws. But if we added other committees, that might be done in a standing rule or something like the STR committee. But it goes into the different types of parts of the committee, and then meetings, how they're governed, quorum, motions, conflict of interest, voting, elections, communications. With the Roberts Rules of Order structure, it has the name of the organization, the objective, which would be the same as the mission. And then it goes into a little more detail about members, classes of members, and we may only have one class, but it could be a definition of who is eligible to be a member. Are there any requirements if you are a member? I think in our case, no. Disciplinary procedures, I don't think that we would need that, but it would be something to consider. And then the officer section is just organized differently than we currently do. We have the name of the officer, the duty of the officers, how they're nominated and how they're elected, eligibility for office for the officers, term of office, removal from office, and vacancies, how are vacancies filled. Some of these things are not in our current bylaws. Meetings, they have meeting days, but not times. So the times and location or type of meeting would be, say, in a standing rule. More of the specifics might be in a standing rule that are more easily changed. Quorum, which is in a completely separate section in ours. Defining special meetings and how they might be noticed, how, et cetera. Cancellation of a regularly scheduled meeting should be noticed. Like in our case, if we decide we're doing 5 months, we want to try to get our bylaws completely done in, say, 5 months so that we have time to go through the approval process, we would possibly cancel scheduled meetings if we don't have any business. Electronic and other meetings. Do we allow email meetings? Do we allow, that kind of thing? Executive boards. In our case, it might just be the officers, but Michael and I have talked about setting up possibly a parliamentarian position, and talked with Mark about that a little bit. He seemed positive about that. But there may be committee chairs that would be part of an executive board that currently isn't happening. And then possibly the executive board would be meeting. It would have to be a public meeting outside of the scheduled bi-monthly meetings, have monthly board meetings, et cetera. Committees, the terms of the committees, the duties of the committees, the manner of selection of committees, like that's an issue right now for our committee. Right now, the bylaws say appointment or election, but that should probably be clarified. The number of members of a committee, eligibility for committee members, and then deleting what is the parliamentary authority. And currently in our bylaws, it talks about some of the state of Oregon kinds of things regulating the committees, and then Robert's Rules of Order where appropriate. It would be in this separate section. How would we amend the bylaws? And I think there is a process currently, but needs to be looked at. And then other bylaw provisions. So all this does is we may or may not want to go with that, but it would give us a kind of a more standard formatting that I think a lot of people are used to seeing in bylaws that haven't been put in the current bylaws. So it's just something I'm throwing out there to see what you think, that we'll talk about with Sarah if you think it's worth pursuing to restructure it. To me, if you restructure at the beginning, then it's going to be, we would map going from the current bylaws into the new structure, and then we could proceed with looking at the changes that need to be happening rather than start with changes and going into try to fit those into a new structure. But that's just my thought. So any comments on any of this?
This is really helpful, Nancy.
This is
Okay.
excellent. You really laid out something very simple for us to look at and make sense out of, and I'm going to spend some time enjoying this. So thank you for doing this.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you know, I mean, this kind of wraps up what we've been talking about. Let's deal with structure first.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it makes it simple, and I love the KISS principle. And it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be totally different. It's close enough, but we just need to rearrange a little bit and make it a little bit more standard and a little more understandable. So I thank you for doing that. And I don't remember seeing this. I'll have to look at it, but if you make sure to send it to me again, I'll be glad to see that.
Yeah, because this is just this great document from Toastmasters. I'll resend it to all of you.
Good one.
And I'll see if Jeff can stick it. I don't know if I should probably get their permission to get on our website, but
That's okay. All right. So
but it's got a lot of information in here about each of these different categories, and it's got another really great thing about process, Michael, on how we do bylaws revisions too, and how you look at the document as well. So I'll resend all that to you guys.
Super. Okay, so I have to take off. I will again look at the recording and finish out the minutes and get it to you over the weekend.
Thanks,
Okay,
Michael,
thank
for
you.
your work.
Yeah, well,
Thank you very much.
Look, I just want to say that this group is a really, really good group, and you know, you speak more than I expect groups to speak, and I think that's excellent. So don't be reticent at all of sending comments one-on-one, and because I'll take them all in and consider them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just second what you said, Michael. I am thoroughly enjoying this group. I think we have a wonderful combination of experience and people wanting to who like bylaws. I mean,
yeah. How about that? Where do you find that kind of a group, right? Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. So
Nancy,
Michael left at 10:32. And Bill,
On these Robert sections, for instance, members, classes of members, then does Roberts have words to suggested words that go along with those?
Yes. And so I'm going to send you a document, Bill, that each of you that goes through each of these different categories and what would be included in each of these different categories. So, and there's actually a sample set of bylaws even in there for a sample, just kind of generic organization. But
and is that the Toastmaster thing you're referring to?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
In fact, I may just send a link to it. It was very helpful. I actually think that it would be good for each of us to get Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, and I may just order them and send them to you because it's just I don't know. Would anyone be interested if I were to send you via Amazon a copy of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised?
I would.
Okay. So if each of you, if you haven't already, sent me your mailing address, I'll order those for you, including you, Susan. I think I don't know. I just love Robert's.
Thank you. That sounds awesome.
Okay. Any more comments on this part before we go to the brainstorm? Okay, so thank you. I'm going to stop this share now and see if I can do a new share. Because I tried to do a okay, so I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Gosh, so are you guys seeing a brainstorm on the screen? Or are you seeing all of my documents?
No, we're seeing a brainstorm.
Okay. So what I did was try to take, I hope I captured the comments that I've heard in the past and some of my own to put in a brainstorm. And I just thought it might be a time saver if I went through those. And then as you're thinking about them, make notes. And then after I go through all of this, if you guys want to add any other brainstorming comments you'd like. So for me, let me just define brainstorming. It is throwing anything out. We don't talk about it. We don't discuss whether it's valid or not, what we'd want to do with it. it's strictly throwing out ideas. And then to me, the process would be that we would then set up a couple of people to go through and organize, or one person, whatever, I could do it if you wanted, but organize these into categories that might fit into the different bylaws sections we have. And it's kind of why when we organize, we need to have a structure defined on what the categories are going to be. But then it gives us a list of things that we might want to tackle. And of course, we'll be needing to modify the list as we go along. We're going to have other things that just come up as we're looking at each section. But does that sound like a good thing in terms of today, just getting everything going through the brainstorm list? So please feel free to add things in at the end. So number one, structure the document as suggested by Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised as appropriate. Number two, look at other CAC bylaws for best practices, formatting, etc. We were talking about earlier as well. Number the paragraphs. Organize amendments by editorial versus structural. I like that Tom suggested, because there, I think he had a good point there. Some of them are more substantive versus not structural. It should be substantive. Adjust the term of the bylaws committee to be appointed or elected at the first meeting of each year, and how to select a chair. Because when the bylaws currently say that the committee needs to be appointed by the outgoing NCAC chair, which didn't happen, makes more sense to have it appointed by the incoming chair, I think, when they're elected. And should they be appointed by the chair? Should they be an election? Should be left up to the chair like it currently is? And then we were elected, and it was like, I said, so what do we do? Like, who calls a meeting? How? Then it turns out we're under Oregon public meeting law. We can't just all talk about when to schedule a meeting and who, how do we select a chair, et cetera. So get some of that set up. Clarify the responsibilities of the bylaws committee. So expand the bylaws committee to include input from the committee members directly. So, as we've talked about, that's been an issue. Make Zoom meetings the default and define how members are identified. Because right now the default is in-person meetings with a potential, and some of this has come from different people. We also need to define electronic voting, how to get electronic voting done. And I've talked about that with Jeff on, it's been kind of an issue in the past of people trying to, if something hasn't been pre-set up in a poll, it's difficult to figure out how to have more than 100 people vote on something. So how do we do that? So, and I expect Jeff to help us with that. Where am I? Oh, consider moving the physical posting of notices or defining their locations. Either removing the physical posting or defining their locations. I think you talked about that some before, Susan, last time, Susan, about, so would it, and that's something that would be good to get input from the residents about. The members about, do they care about a physical posting, or is having everything on the website and email notifications adequate? Where are we? Change the quorum requirements for public meetings of officers and committees. We have a number of people talk about quorum. These are Alexis's. All subcommittees of the NCAC are open to all members. Members can request to be a volunteer on any subcommittee at an NCAC committee meeting through a roll call vote. Members do not have to be recommended or identified by the NCAC chair to volunteer, but must be voted by the membership. All NCAC votes will be decided upon by a standard quorum of 50%. So those are Alexis's brainstorm or motions. Establish a members approved bylaws committee separate from NCAC board members, another Alexis one. Clean up the will shall mixture of terms. That's editorial. How do we reach the people in the NCAC area that are not now active? So that's kind of from Susan's comment last time. Define membership voting and rights. Allow people to self-identify their community participation, all that applies so the government bodies we interface can gauge our inputs and give examples. Align NCAC with NCA territory. Define NCAC territory by county designations, not streets, or however Tillamook County wants to see it. Clarify and or redefine committee membership, appointment by chair versus election, etc. Explicitly state that subcommittees of the NCAC are subject to the open meetings law. Nominating committee exception to OPML, elected only. That's another thing on the list for Sarah. Nominating committees need to be able to talk in private, I would think, unless all they do is get input from people who want to be submitted and stick them up on the website. So I don't know. I'm used to nominating committees that actually go out and try to find people to fill office. And so anyway, I'm not sure really what ours does. In terms of officers and committee members, we still have the statement in the bylaws from the first 2 years that the NCAC was set up. So that needs to be removed. Add parliamentarian position to assess the presiding officer on the interpretation of procedures and provide training. I talked to Mark about that and he seemed very positive about having that. So in the past year, when there have been some kind of tense situations, I've kind of spoken up and tried to facilitate, but I was kind of out of order. That there really should be a parliamentarian who the chair could call on for assistance, or any member could call on for assistance. Define officers and their responsibilities, that's a typo, and NCA chair, have the NCAC chair as an ex officio voting member of every committee. So that one came from me. I am used to that the chair or the president, the presiding officer, should be, in my opinion, authorized to be able to participate in any committee officially, but not obligated to. It would be, if they wanted to come to meetings, they would have that right to. It's not in the bylaws right now, which obviously conflicts with another suggestion up here. So anyway, that's on my list. So hit me with other suggestions.
Tell me where the next to last one came from. Define officers and their responsibilities.
I think that was from, I believe that was from Michael.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
Bill, just
seems
to
be
comment on that. I looked at that yesterday, and one of the things that I noticed that is missing from our bylaws now is currently a definition of the offices as opposed to the officer's responsibilities. I think it's a technical addition rather than anything else.
All right, because that seemed to be the one thing that was pretty thoroughly addressed in here.
So I think
typically what I see at bylaws is you define what the offices are, and then you define what their responsibilities are.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we've conflated both of those.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I will just add a comment that generally speaking, without addressing each one of these, when I reviewed our bylaws, it struck me as the bylaws of a New England town hall government, where all decisions are made by the membership of the town, and officers' roles are pretty perfunctory. And I query, and maybe Susan is the best person to answer this. It seems to me that as an organization, the maturization of this group would lend itself to giving the officers more responsibility without having to take everything to a general vote, i.e. appointment of committee members, things of that nature, whether that be by executive committee or by the chair. But is this organization mature enough to go ahead and kind of abandon the town hall concept and go to a more standard format?
Okay, I think I've captured that. Can you see when I type stuff or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think historically from since my family was involved in the 1960s and 70s that we have taken everything to membership. So I think to give the full power to the officers would go against what Nespelin has been set up as historically.
And I think I'm going to go back to brainstorming and I know, thank you for answering what Wyatt was saying, Susan. All of these are going to generate a lot of discussion. So I just want to get down ideas at this point. So just hit me with ideas and
Brainstorms, yeah.
any other things that you see as a issue. And obviously this is not the be all to end all. As we go along, we're going to come up with other kinds of things, but
well, maybe this is covered in other ones, but we're struggling with the same thing at the golf course with who is a member, who gets to vote, and is there somehow a difference? So if two people own a house together, is that one vote? And is one of the people a voting member, the other person a non-voting member? Who cares if somebody's a non-voting member? Does that have any significance at all? So that sort of membership and voting, which was one of the early things in that Roberts screen that you showed.
yeah, and it's up here on the list too. But no, I think you're getting to it more specifically, which is great. How do we verify who's a member?
About it at the elections. So she might be a good resource on this because it was something that came up recently at the elections.
Right. I missed the first part of what you said, Susan. What was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. My comment was just that I remember Sarah Absher qualified who could vote in the most recent NCAC election.
Yes.
And it was not one vote per household. It was based on ownership. So if you had family trusts, anyone who was in the family trust could vote, LLCs, etc. But I think it could be fleshed out. I agree with Bill that it needs to be fleshed out so everyone knows.
Yeah. Okay. I have another one that just came to mind too. And how do we marry verification with of eligibility with privacy? Like one of the I think in one of the bylaws changes that happened, there was a change in how we registered for meetings where we had to put in more information, and there may be people who don't want their personal information put out there in a public setting. So how do we handle that in conjunction with Oregon public meeting laws? You should be able to participate without necessarily having, whether you own a house there or how you're involved necessarily in a public setting. There must be some other way to do it that we could define.
I noticed that the city CAC maintains a membership list, which might be something to consider, where the eligibility is determined and maintained privately.
Okay, and I thought I had something in here about standing rules, but I don't see it. So I'm just going to add them in. Add in. Okay. Because standing rules have their own, they're usually put at the end of the bylaws, but they can be amended completely separately and more flexibly and give a little more specifics to, say, officer responsibilities and that kind of thing, and times of day, etc. So anything else that you're thinking about? If you think of things in the next couple of weeks too, just please shoot them to me and I'll add them to the brainstorming list, and probably pretty close to the beginning of the next meeting, I'll send them out to you. And we may even just put some of these out there on the website for people to look at as well once we get the website live. But please feel free to shoot those to me, and you're welcome to shoot them to each other. Would you prefer having them go to one another through a BCC so it's one-on-one, or would you rather just send them to me and have them compiled?
I think sending them to you, Nancy, would eliminate some of the confusion of drafts that some of us didn't get. So having a central distribution point makes a lot of sense.
Okay, does that sound okay to everybody? Okay. Yes. So I have on the agenda to appoint 2 members to organize the ideas from the brainstorm, but I wonder if we need to talk about structure first. I kind of feel like we got somewhat of a consensus to look at structure. If there's no objection, I can go through and try to organize some of this between now and the next meeting as well, after talking to Sarah and just seeing if there are any objections to going with this new structure, and also go through this with Mark. But should there not be, I'll also send out links to the other bylaws. If you guys want to take a look at other bylaws in the CACs in Tillamook County, feel free. But are there, if Sarah has no objections to our following Robert's rules, do you guys support the idea of going more with the Robert's Rules of Order structure that I outlined on the other spreadsheet? Yes.
Are you talking about for us as a committee or the organization as a whole?
Well, for us to use as for the bylaws structure to recommend to the organization as a whole.
No, I have no objection.
Okay, so yeah, I'll get some, and I'll send you a report after the conversation with Sarah. Unfortunately, we can't have, unless she comes to this meeting, and I did invite her, but she wasn't available. We could, you know, we can't have everybody talking with her directly. So, so anyway, I'll send out a report. If you have anything that you'd like me to bring up to her other than what we've talked about today, just shoot me an email or a text, and I'll make sure to include that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this threshold question is this sentence that says the committee should be responsible for reviewing changes to the bylaws suggested by the chair and the general membership.
Right.
What is the scope of our?
Sure. What we're allowed to do. Yeah, I agree. And thank you for bringing that up. So the only other thing on the agenda is public comment. So Susan, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I kind of made comment along the way. Thank you for allowing that.
No, I appreciate it. And we're going to get you here very shortly, just another month. So officially. All right. So I guess we're going to actually end up early. So meeting summary and action items, I think we'll review the minutes, and when Michael sends out the minutes from this meeting and the previous meeting, we will review everybody could take a look at the brainstorm. I'll send that out. I'll send out the 2 existing process documents for your review, and then you could just shoot those comments to Michael and Tom if you'd like. And then I will also be talking to Sarah, and we're hoping, I think Mark may be on that meeting with us too, so he'll and then Jeff and I are continuing he has been incredibly helpful. I have to thank him so much. He's getting everything set up for us, and he's also involved in a lot of other things with NCAC, so I can't thank him enough. But I'll send out notes where he can when he has updates to the website, and we're ready to go public with that. But I think we're doing a good job of trying to maintain transparency, and I think the meeting was well noticed, and it's not just us, so I'm guessing we have built up some trust already. I'm going to take it that way anyway. So thank you all. I will ask, when I send out a note, if you could please just email me back that you got it. You don't have to say anything else, just got it. I just want to make sure things are landing, because using this BCC technique. And is there anything I'm missing? terms of
We
action
didn't get a
items.
report. We didn't get a report on when Susan's going to next be in Nesquin.
And
What,
when
say again?
Susan's,
When are you going to next be in Nesquin?
I'm here right now. Actually, I dialed into the meeting from the golf course, but then I moved
Beautiful.
to my car because my iPad was losing juice.
Beautiful. Okay.
So I'm
That's
here
great.
now.
All right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And I guess we will just adjourn early unless someone has anything else they'd like to bring up. We've got 5 minutes. Oh, I guess we should, for the agenda for next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks from today, we can do a further discussion of the process. I'll have a chair's report at every meeting. And then I'll report on our conversation with Sarah publicly there. And then we can continue talking about the bylaw section review and the so how we structure and then actually try to have some organization of the amendments. And then I'd like to be able to set up, maybe even go through. I'm guessing we probably wouldn't actually have a mapping yet of the bylaws, but have a committee that could actually map. If we agree at the next meeting to go with the Robert's Rules of Order structure, have a mapping committee of 2 who could go through and just map the existing bylaws to the new with numbering, and then we could go through and assign people to actually start on I think what Robert's Rules suggests for bylaws changing is to set it up section by section and have a committee for each section talking about that, and then reporting back at the general meeting of the bylaws committee for comment on what they're coming up with section by section. So that might be one way to approach it, or it may be that based on what our brainstorming is, that it may make more sense to tackle certain sections together. So you guys can put on your thinking hats between now and then as well. But does that sound okay? We'll kind of, I'll put out an agenda probably in about a week after we get some input from everybody on these action items, and we can go from there. And you'll have a chance to comment on the agenda. If you have any comments on an agenda, can you make them within 48 hours, and then I can post it, have Jeff post it for us. So does that sound like a game plan?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, meeting adjourned at 10:57. And thank you all. Have a great 2 weeks.
All right.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy Nesquin, Susan.
Thank you. It's gorgeous. Bluebird sky today. The golf course is looking great.
It has been just day after day.
Yeah.
I'm going to end the recording.
All right.